To today's Black History Month webinar. It's brought to you by Accessible Archives and Unlimited Priorities. Unlimited Priorities is the exclusive sales, marketing, production, content licensing, everything for Accessible Archives. We provide a variety of services. Whenever you are talking with Accessible Archives, chances are you are talking to one of us. And so if you have questions about this webinar or about any of the items that we are discussing, please don't hesitate to drop us a line. And here's our information. And this is all part of the webinar link that you will receive later. A quick overview of the agenda. We'll talk a little bit about Accessible Archives. Then we'll review our African American newspapers collection. We will also review 2 additional abolitionist newspapers that we have published. We will talk a little bit about the search interface, and then we'll do a Q&A session at the very end. If we do not get to your question at the end of the session, please just type it in and I will send you a personal email with a response. Accessible Archives believes that primary source documents are the most important way of learning about the past. Aside from human memory and the unrecorded passing down of information from generation to generation, histories based upon primary sources are really the only way the current generation can hope to understand what has happened before. Accessible Archives provides a very diverse primary source collection. Our online databases provide broad views across 200 years of American history and culture, focusing very heavily on the 18th and 19th century, but we have moved into the early 20th century. And you can review this content through full text searches and digital images. Accessible Archives collections and the search interface allow users to spend more time exploring documents themselves rather than trying to find them. One thing that we are very strong in terms of our content is ensuring that the images that are on a page are really kind of brought to life. Images also bring culture to life. We have several publications in the Accessible Archives family that includes color plates, and we want you to be able to see those. This is black and white. My color images unfortunately didn't print out. Reference librarians, students, faculty, historians, general interest researchers can trace the development of America in the 18th, 19th, and early 20th centuries through Accessible Archives collections. Our collections create endless possibilities for new and more thorough research and understanding of our history. Now let's go ahead and we'll jump into our African American newspapers. Oops, not that fast. We have a collection of African American newspapers. Do we have the largest collection in the world? No. But one thing that kind of sets us apart is that with the newspapers that we've published in this collection, they are full, complete runs. We're not missing issues. It's not like you're going to get 2 or 3 issues and nothing else. You're going to get the complete run, everything that is available extant for that particular publication. Our African American newspapers collections provide a great deal of information on not only the history, but it does kind of bring that history to life because it talks about culture, society, what's going on. And in some cases, there's even gossip. Our publication, our collection of African American newspapers have lots of names. So all of you genealogists out there, right, you can start salivating now because it's got lots of names. There are also biographies. The interesting thing about this collection of African American newspapers is that it does have a literature component. In many of these publications, they always gave opportunities for local and national poets, writers, essayists, to really kind of put information out there to the general public, keeping in mind that many of these publications were published by African Americans for African Americans. So it's really kind of a unique aspect to kind of look at the literature, the poetry that's being included in these publications, to really kind of see what's going on in terms of the 19th century. There are also advertisements. Advertisements were extremely important for these publications. And who purchased the products that were advertised? But African Americans. All of these collections really do kind of give you another perspective on the African American experience. Here is a list of the publications that we have. And you'll note that several of these are Frederick Douglass publications. But we also have some others that were kind of different. We have a Canadian publication. We have a publication that was very strong on religious beliefs. We have a publication that dealt primarily with the post-Civil War period, the Reconstruction era. And then we have the Negro Business League Herald, that was actually a publication that was created for the Black middle class. And what I'd like to do now is kind of focus in on three of the publications in our African American newspapers collection, and just kind of give you a little background on those publications. And these are kind of unique publications. The first one is called the Provincial Freeman. And being that Canada was the northernmost terminus of the Underground Railroad, all along the US-Canadian border, there were little enclaves of runaway slaves. And these areas, these communities, began to grow, and they were interested in what was going on in the United States. They were safe because they were in Canada. There was no fugitive slave law in Canada. Slavery had been abolished right in the British Empire. And so they felt very safe and secure, but they wanted to know what was happening in America. They wanted to know what was happening in the areas that they had formerly been slaves in. So a lot of these communities created newspapers to kind of gather information and to keep people informed. This weekly newspaper was edited and published by former slaves in the province of Canada West, which is now known as Ontario. Canada was very supportive of our Canadians were very supportive of these publications. And the Provincial Freeman is probably the best example. It was one of the longest run newspapers in those particular communities in Canada. While there were many African American newspapers in Black Canadian communities, this one stands out for a very obvious reason. The first African American woman publisher was the person that created the Provincial Freeman. Her name was Mary Ann Shade Carey. And to give you a little background about her, she was born into a prominent Black family in Wilmington, Delaware. And later, her family moved to Westchester, Pennsylvania, where she became acquainted with the beliefs of Quakers. And this kind of garnered an interest in the idea to promote self-reliance and independence among those former slaves that were now living in Canada. She helped found the Provincial Freeman and became the first Black North American female editor and publisher. And the driving force for her was to really try to get these, as she called them, Black refugees into the mode of model citizens. She was very much into the abolitionist movement, but she had that Canadian. She had married a Canadian, and she was living in Ontario, and so she was not quite as involved as others in the abolitionist movement. The next publication I'd like to highlight is the Christian Recorder. And we have this publication from its beginning through to and including 1902. There was a year, 1892, where there was no Christian Recorder published. The reasoning for that was funding. The church simply could not fund the publication at that particular time. This is the publication of the African Methodist, or the AME Church. And the interesting thing is, this publication is still alive and well today, still performing the same obligations that it had undertaken in the 19th century, and it still very, very much is a vibrant publication. The Christian Recorder during the 19th century embodied the secular as well as our religious. You could find articles about government, politics, and a religious service that was being conducted, lectures, sermons. All of these sorts of things could be found in the Christian Recorder. One thing that it's really well known for is that it provided excellent coverage of Black regiments during the Civil War. And in that capacity, it actually would print names of soldiers. It might even, in some cases, print lists of deaths and casualties during various battles. So for you genealogists, this would be a treasure trove publication. For those that are looking at history in general, it really does provide you with a unique view on the African American participation in the war. After the war, the publication kind of took a turn in that it became one of the sponsors for projects that would support the freed slaves. It provided a great deal of outreach through its various churches and the expansion of the of the AME Church after the war exploded. They basically every community would have an AME church, and therefore freed slaves would use that as kind of a rallying point as far as getting support, finding family members, that those sorts of things. Please let me know if I'm going too fast, and I'll try to slow down. Sometimes I get on a roll. That's part of the problem with being a former school teacher, is that I get into lecture mode. I hope that's not the case, but if so, please let me know. And let me check and make sure we don't have any hands, or if we do, let's see if we've got any hands raised. Angela, are you? Let's see. Real quickly here, let me.
Yes.
Yes. Are you having? Did you have a question?
Actually, yes. Mine is pertaining to copyright. I want to know, when you got ready to digitize the newspapers, what was the process for you to be able to place the newspapers online, and if your specific library or archive actually has copyright to the newspaper?
Okay. When we basically what we do, one of the jobs that I have is to kind of seek out libraries that have particular publications. And with the publications that we find that we decide to digitize, those particular libraries receive um, a digital version of their publication. Do we go out and source from multiple libraries? Generally not. Because what I do is I spend or we have spent in the past a great deal of time searching for the library that has everything. And so that's what we've been able to do here. We generally don't add to a collection because we don't have to. I mean, we basically have the full run, and there are times when people would contact us and say, well, I have this publication, and then when we look it up, we find, well, so do we, thank you, but we really don't need a duplicate. Does that answer your question?
I think so, and I think more or less because I was interested in our archives. We have a wide variety of newspapers, and in particular, you mentioned if something is already done. So we have the whole entire newspaper collection for the Harper's Weekly, and in addition to having the newspapers, we also have the bound copies of all of the specific issues. So I was wondering, so if we were interested in having the newspapers digitized a part of your database, how would that happen? Because we acquired the newspapers, or let me just say this: they were there before I became the archivist. So I don't really have much detail on the information. So I think that was why I asked about the issue regarding copyright.
What you can do is I will send you an email, and what we can do
Okay.
is we can take that offline, because I would like to know more about what you have.
Okay. Sounds great.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Let's see, the Christian Recorder. Okay, the Freedmen's Record is the next publication, and this publication is part of a new collection that we published We released it in 2017, and it has really garnered a great deal of interest. And the reason being is that this is a post-Civil War publication. So this is not talking about slavery other than dealing with the consequences of slavery. This particular publication provides a unique look at the various issues that were faced by freed slaves and the efforts to provide opportunities for freedmen to enter American society. Now, I will say, right, you're looking at this and you're thinking, well, wait a minute, that says Freedmen's Journal, but it's the Freedmen's Record. The first issue of the Freedmen's Record was called the Freedmen's Journal. And what they found was that everyone thought this was Frederick Douglass's publication that was called Freedom Journal. And so what they decided to do was to change the title and say, no, this is not that publication. This is a totally new publication. And it was sponsored by the New England Freedmen's Aid Society, which had as its members many former slaves that had escaped to the Boston area. So it really kind of inculcated a variety, a really good diverse mix in terms of the society members. Within the pages of the Freedmen's Journal, you can read details about the harsh living conditions in the South, the famines that were rampant throughout the South. I mean, keep in mind, the war had just ended. The war had destroyed much of the agricultural production in the South. There was an extreme lack of medical care. There never really were that many hospitals in the South anyway during the antebellum period. And now you have even less. You had a breakdown of the slave family, partially because of, one, the war, two, prior to the war, you had families that were broken up and sold off individually to other plantations. The nice thing about the Freedmen's Record is that, or the interesting thing about the Freedmen's Record is that it did print letters in the publication about success stories, about families that were reunited, about people that actually gained employment. It was kind of interesting in a place like Charleston during the antebellum period. There were a number of African American slaves that were trained as bricklayers. Well, after the war, with so much destruction in the South, these folks could basically select wherever they wanted to build. People would hire them. They were a skilled labor force. I know it's always kind of interpreted that slaves in the South were all agricultural hands. It was all agricultural labor. But there were pockets where there were skilled slaves, and after the war, they were able to really kind of create these little craft guilds that would help them in terms of getting employment. And the Freedmen's Record kind of talks about this. It's interesting, but much of the New England Freedmen's Aid Society work was done in South Carolina. So if you're interested in South Carolina, or if you have a family that came from South Carolina or knew, or if you're from South Carolina and you want to know about an area, this is a publication that would give you a lot of interesting details. The Aid Society also worked in Georgia as well as Alabama. They didn't go much farther into the deep South than Alabama, but certainly South Carolina, Georgia, and Alabama were the primary focus areas. The Freedmen's Record also provide information, notes, news stories, reports on things happening in society, not only in the South but also in the North. It provided kind of documentation on the issue of race relations, racial incidents. There's a particularly long article that deals with the problem of color phobia in the nation's capital, because after the war, so many former slaves moved into Washington, D.C., and the population, right, were not really assimilating them as well as they should have. And so, in essence, there was this kind of underlying current. So that's kind of portrayed in the Freedmen's Record. Now, we're going to kind of leave the African American newspapers collection, which is a discrete product all by itself. And many of you attending today are actually customers of Accessible Archives, and you have many of these publications either in your subscription, or you've acquired them via permanent access. So if it seems like I'm going over stuff that you already know, hopefully I'm giving you a little more insight into what's actually in the collection itself. I always wanted to be a reference librarian, but I just couldn't do a library school. But anyway, so let's talk real quickly about two other publications that are available from Accessible Archives, and then we'll get into the actual search page. And these publications are the Liberator and the National Anti-Slavery Standard. And as with all of our publications, again, these are the complete runs. This is everything you can possibly have, every issue available. And unlike other publishers that may have 2 or 3 issues, well, we give it to you all at once. And we also provide you with the actual title. You don't have to buy 10 other things to get to the National Anti-Slavery Standard. You can just walk in and buy the National Anti-Slavery Standard. But let's talk a little bit about the Liberator. William Lloyd Garrison. Why that does that? William Lloyd Garrison was the publisher of the Liberator, and Garrison was probably the most journalistic crusader who advocated for the immediate emancipation of slaves, not gradual. There was a tone within the abolitionist movement that basically said, well, should we do it immediately, or should it be a gradual sort of emancipation? Excuse me. And Garrison gained a national reputation for being one of the most radical of American abolitionists and leader of the radical abolition movement. The other publication is the National Anti-Slavery Standard, and this was the official weekly newspaper of the American Anti-Slavery Society. It was published by a husband and wife team, Linda and David Child, who also were abolitionists, very strong abolitionists, but not quite to the Garrison model. The National Anti-Slavery Standard was published both in New York City and Philadelphia, and began during a time when the American Anti-Slavery Society was torn over tactics of how to go about emancipating slaves. The National Anti-Slavery Standard featured writings from all sides of the abolitionist movement. It fought for suffrage, both for African American males, but it did also support African American women's suffrage, as well as women's suffrage in general. It felt that equality, as well as equality and emancipation, goes hand in hand. It contained essays, debates, speeches, reports, or anything deemed newsworthy in relation to the question of slavery in society, as well as the activities of abolitionists in the North. Its two key focuses were the elimination of slavery. I'm sorry. Its two key focuses in the elimination of slavery were on politics and religion. Although it asserted that God was the only being that could actually end slavery, it recognized the value of political action. And the National Anti-Slavery Standard was a very small publication. I mean, we're talking about a publication that was crammed full of information on just 4 pages. And it always provided an opportunity to present personal accounts of slavery, which really helped in terms of the whole slavery controversy. This is a review that was done by a, goodness gracious, that was done by a grad student at the University of Alabama, and she used the African American newspapers collection and our abolition collection newspapers in her graduate thesis. And I thought this was great because I've actually talked to this person, and it was an eye-opening experience for her. And I think the interesting thing here is that when you start to look at these publications, you really do get a better feel for really what was going on in the 19th century, and how things changed over the course of the 19th century. It really does give you, as John Hope Franklin so aptly mentioned, that view of from slavery to freedom. When you purchase our collections, whether you do it with a permanent access purchase or with a subscription, we provide a number of open access collections. And these include, these publications are related to Black History Month. And they are the Scenes in the Life of Harriet Tubman, which was a biography. And you can scroll through this, do whatever you want with this publication. There's also the publication called The 12 Years a Slave. And these are really great publications that you can pull things out of and use if you are in, say, a high school class or a K-12 school. This is something that would work very, very well with them. And then the history of women's suffrage does talk about the extension of suffrage to African American women as well. And I think this slide's kind of self-explanatory, so we'll kind of look at it real quick, and then we'll move up there, and then we'll move on. I have a gremlin somewhere in this thing because it loves to keep advancing. This is what we'll do for the next few slides is talk about the search screen. I'm going to, oh my goodness, I'm already a little over, actually quite a bit over what I was hoping to do, but let's kind of push through this. And this is a sample of our search screen. Please note that we have help everywhere on the screen. And I've circled just 2 spots, but if you actually get in, if you do a search and you're not sure what you should do next, again, there's another help button. So we always want you to be able to find your way. And so we make sure that we have lots of help buttons around. Please note that in this particular screen, this is a basic search. If you want to expand it to include more search terms, you simply go to the Show More Search buttons, click that, and more things pop, more boxes open up, and you can do and or. You can do full text search, which generally most people do. You can do keyword because we do have a word index. You can search if you just want to search newspapers. You check the box. If you want to search just books, the same way. If you've got a specific date, you can enter the date, or if you have a particular publication. Now, note here that in the publication title, we include both the collection title, which is African American newspapers in this case, or if you're looking for just one publication, if you just want to search the Freedmen's Record, then you can actually scroll down to the Freedmen's Record and highlight that particular publication, and you can then search just that publication. If you want to search multiple publications, say you want to search Frank Leslie's Weekly, Freedmen's Record, and the Christian Recorder, you simply hold and highlight on those publications. This is our search screen. If you put in a term, say drink, you can do the full text searchability. Search capability permits the student or user the opportunity to explore collections by using a single query. Our search screen is shown in this slide. You can apply filters, like I had just stated. The interesting thing here too is that you can do a search history. So say you do 10 searches and you think, well, wait a minute, now I want to go, I want to find my original search or an original search that I had done on a different topic. You can go back to your search history and find it. You've done a search and you come up with this. Now, I did a search using the term fugitive, and I used the collection name African American newspapers, and what I came up with was 5,487 results. Now, if you look to the far left, I can break this up by date, and for each year, it gives me the total number of results. But if I want to further narrow the search, then I can go to the narrow results by searching box. And again, I can keep narrowing my search down until I get to certainly less than 5,000 items, because no one's going to look at 5,487 items. One thing that will always happen on the results screen is you'll always know what search, and you'll always know what your limiters are. And there's a button here that says that you can go back to your original search. Here I've actually selected publications, or no, in this case I searched everything. I'm sorry, I searched everything. So you can see where I can further narrow it down using the publication type or the individual collection, or in the next slide I'll show you, right, you can actually do it down further by date. Again, there's our help box up there. Right, and here again you can see where there are publication dates. The interesting thing here too is that all of the results are hyperlinked to actual entries. If you want to read the full article, you can actually click on the dark highlighted title, and that will take you to the full article. If you just want to see your keyword in context, then you can actually click on that button, and it'll show you the keyword within the text, but it will not show you the whole article. You have to hit another button on that page that will show the actual full article. If you hover over the little pictures, the icons, it will provide you with a description of that particular publication. And the little cameras, right, basically tell you that there are page images that you can look at. If there are no page images, then there will be no box or no little camera. You can email your results list by simply hitting email URLs. You can create a print version by simply going to the by hitting the print button. The other way that you can search on accessible archives is a thing called browse the archives. Say you just want to kind of scroll through and look at things without anything specific. Simply go to browse the archives, and you'll get a list of things like this. Again, if you hover over any of the icons, they will provide you with a description of that particular publication. You'll have the publication title. If you click issues, it will list all of the issues by date. So say you wanted 1840 or 1850, you would click on 1850, and that would have a drop-down view of every issue for 1850 for that particular publication. If you click on African American newspapers, that will take you to our marketing page. So that will actually take you out of the product. Here's a one thing that kind of sets Accessible Archives apart from other publishers is that we rekey everything. So you're not looking at this page that's barely readable and trying to discern what does it say. You're not looking at microfilm. You're not looking at dirty OCR. What you're doing is you have on one side, you will have a facsimile reproduction of the exact page image, and then you'll have a nice, clean, retyped copy available. So when you search on our products, you are as close to 100% accurate as you can possibly get. Granted, even I once in a while misspell the, so obviously there can be a misspelling. The interesting thing too is when you see the retype of a person's name and you think, oh well, that name is misspelled. What you have to remember is that names do change over time. So that may not be a misspelling. Here is another example. Yeah, oops. And there you can see whenever your search term comes up on a page, it will be highlighted in red and will be bold. So you'll be able to easily see your item. All right, and we're almost completed here. And let me run through real quick, give you an opportunity to kind of do a big plug for Accessible Archives. This is some of our benefits as far as our products go. These are full text databases. They are complete. You don't have miscellaneous issues. You have everything, or else we don't publish it. We have transcribed individual entries. We do provide full bibliographic citations. And you can conduct full text searches over everything. And with our faceted search screen, you can keep digging until you get down to something that's manageable. And it's much, much easier than the way searching used to be. Back in years and years and years ago, right? I worked on digital products, and I can remember what it was like searching in 2002 for something, and it was a nightmare. The nice thing about our content is that it's all TEI Lite XML available, and we really do put a great effort to ensure that the metadata it is what our users need and want. This is just what some of our customers say. And the interesting thing is, for those of you that are libraries that might be interested in this collection, we do provide free MARC records. We are counter and sushi compliant, and we do support all of the major discovery services. We also have a blog, and you can always sign up to the blog. And the nice thing about the blog is that if you have an information literacy class, if you're a librarian, we have these really great little blog posts where we really don't give plugs for ourselves. We talk about the content, and the interesting thing there is you can kind of fit those into an information literacy class. We also we have a Facebook page. We tweet, and we're on LinkedIn. So we're good on social media. Okay, now we're at the question stage. So let me see what we've got here. We've got some hands up. Let's see what we got here. Linda, what's your question? Sorry about the delay in getting there. He's typing me a question. Okay, how about the other Linda? Any questions? Angela.
Okay, yes. If we have a set of original slave narratives, how or what is required if you wanted to have that collection available on your specific database?
Okay. Could you repeat that a little louder?
We have a set of slave narratives, and I want to know what would I need to do if we wanted to actually be a part of accessible archives and have the collection accessible there as well.
Um, what I would do there is we would have a conversation and
Okay.
kind of look at what you have and how it would fit with our collection and
Okay.
our collection kind of principles. Um, but we could always discuss that uh, without any questions, without any problems. I'm always
Okay.
interested in looking at new content.
Okay.
All right. Either of the Lindas have any questions? We had some hands up. Let's see if we've got any questions here. Oh, here we go. Right, we got to see what geographic area is the Christian report based on. Hold on just a second here. Oh, I closed the box there. What geographic area is the Christian Recorder based on? It's primarily the East Coast. So you have. Am I going to say that there's nothing in there from New Jersey? There is, but it's very heavily the East Coast down through probably Alabama. If you're looking for Mississippi, probably not as much, nor will you west of the Appalachians. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be bits and pieces there, but if you're looking for lots of content, then it's going to be primarily the Mid-Atlantic and the southeastern states. It goes up through 1902, and with the spread of the AME Church westward, will you find things about California? Probably. Will there be lots of things on California? Probably not. But I can't say for sure if there's 10% of the collection or 3% on those areas. I can just say that it primarily focused along the East Coast. Hopefully that helped you. Uh, 1892 was the year that the Christian Recorder was not published. Okay. I don't even remember 78 degrees. I think we had 78 degrees. What was it? September, maybe. I used to live in Connecticut, and it was an interesting experience. And then I moved a little further south. Now my colleague Iris Haney lives in Florida. Pardon me. And so yeah, I think if it gets below 70 degrees, she puts on a coat. I'm retiring though in Michigan, by the way. Let's see. I'm looking. for any other questions that may have come in. Let's see. I think I've got everybody. All righty. Oh, here we go. We got one here. Will you be adding 20th century coverage? Probably not beyond 1922, 1923. The problem that we have is that we want to stay outside of the copyright issue. So we pretty much end our publications in 1923. We have probably the largest American county histories collection, and all of our county histories will run up to 1923, but they don't go beyond that because anything beyond that is going to be copyrighted. But that has not stopped us from having the largest, most complete American county histories collection of any publisher. And again, if you're interested, if you're a genealogist or a local historian, things like the American county histories are just amazing. If you're looking at population trends, say you were in Cobb County, Georgia, in our Georgia county histories collection, you can actually look at the development of that particular county as far as population, the skilled labor versus unskilled labor. You can look at surrounding counties. It really provides a unique opportunity. With our African American newspapers, I think we're looking at a couple things that would provide other looks at the African American experience. But one thing we don't do is we don't duplicate what's already been published. So if another publisher out there puts out 10 issues of a 12-issue publication, then we will probably not publish it, just because the difficulty would be trying to convince people that they've got to buy ours because we have 2 more issues. So I don't see us moving much past 1923. Okay, well, I've kept you all longer than what I had anticipated. I thank you all very, very much. And if you have any additional questions, please feel free to send me an email. I will follow up with you. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Atlanta Fulton County Public Library. If you need anything from us, we're always available. Thank you now. Y'all have a great day.